welcome back. This is part 3 in my Emotions Bootcamp series. Today we'll be talking about sadness. Alright, sadness is not one of those emotions that most people like to talk about, much less feel. So I'm going to just go over the highlights and keep this video pretty brief. So if you recall, I've been using the autonomic nervous system as kind of a place to start to understand our emotions physiologically. If you recall, with anger and fear, I talked about the sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight part of the autonomic nervous system. With sadness, it's the parasympathetic system that's energized. So the other one is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is what's also called rest and digest. It's that part of the system that has us slow down and actually not move. Where the other one has us mobilize and move, this one causes us to slow down. Now it's important to recognize this because, after all, sadness is a slower emotion, especially compared to anger and fear. Now why is that? It's important to know that with sadness, what it's really trying to get us to do is to slow down and honor what it is that we've lost. Imagine being sad and bouncing from place to place. You're not able to honor that missing thing. So physiologically, survival-wise, sadness's physiological expression is for us to slow down and help us feel the significance of what we lost. What have we lost? What we've lost, and I've said this throughout all of my videos in this series, is we've lost connection to a value. Really simply, person, place, thing. We've lost something. And by thing, what I also mean is an experience. So why is sadness so difficult? Well, for one, it causes us, like I said, to slow down. And what it really does is it causes us very oftentimes to feel vulnerable. And what's interesting with this autonomic nervous system move from sympathetic to parasympathetic is that what we're shooting for physiologically is just homeostasis. We're shooting for a balance. When we're in that very high-pitched fight or fight place in the sympathetic response, we oftentimes, even though we might be very chaotic, we can many times feel, well, energized and potentially powerful because we're running away from or towards the thing, and, well, we're doing something about the situation. With sadness, because the parasympathetic response is triggered and we're in that slower place where respiration is slowed down, heart rate is slowed down, it can very oftentimes have us feel vulnerable. Specifically, physiologically, vulnerable to outside attack. And I think that's why psychologically we get to a place where, very socially we get to a place where we say that sadness is showing weakness. Nothing could be further from the truth, of course. But the weakness that I think we're experiencing is that slowed down response in which we're not in a place to keep ourselves safe. And I keep doing all of this. I do that a lot of times because every time I do that, those air quotes thing, what I'm really talking about is how society determines and tells us what we should be thinking. And it's very much unfortunate that with sadness, like all the other emotions, but especially with sadness, we're given messages that say we shouldn't be sad. In fact, culturally, we are very much not even given bereavement from work when we have lost someone. Sometimes some companies do give bereavement, but kind of generically and superficially, we're expected to just get over it. And in fact, what I encourage you to do is to really think about your childhood messages that you got about emotions, and of course here specifically about sadness. There's a very good chance that you were told things like, boys don't cry, sadness is weakness, you should just be able to get over it and move on. Really what's going on here is it's the person expressing that who's saying that they are in fact uncomfortable with the emotion. That's really the difficult thing here, is to recognize, man, you don't like the emotion, so therefore you're telling me I shouldn't like the emotion, and let's just pretend it doesn't exist. What happens when we don't fully express our sadness? Well, besides the energetic or the energy being caught in the body and transforming itself into anxiety and anger and frustration, like I've mentioned in other videos, psychologically, what we're not doing is honoring what we've lost. What we're doing is we're not connecting to that value that's gone missing in our lives. And what happens when we don't connect? What we do is we have that loss perpetuate itself for much longer than it needs to. And I believe this is why a lot of people are deathly afraid of feeling sad, is because it turns into something that is not sadness at all. It turns into pity or depression. So it's important here to distinguish the difference between those. At the very core of sadness, all it is some mental recognition of the lost person, place, thing, and then a physiological experience in the body. That and nothing more. Sadness, really, like all the other emotions seen from a clean perspective, is really simple. There's not much going on. You have heaviness in the chest, you have a tightness in the throat, you might have tears or heat behind your eyes. There's the physiological, plus perhaps a lack of motivation or desire to move, and then mentally, hopefully, just an image or a reminder of the thing that you've lost. What's the difference between that and pity and depression? Well, the only really big difference is you have potentially that physiological response, but then you're judging the response as bad and wrong. And specifically, you're saying to the world, to you really, you're saying to yourself that this is wrong and bad and awful and unfair and shouldn't be. What we're doing, really, is simply pushing away and resisting the physiological experience of that sadness. But mentally, what we're also doing is we're refusing to acknowledge the loss, to accept that that thing is gone. When we do that, we're not able to cleanly connect with that missing value. Now I say that because what our ultimate goal is with loss is not only to feel the emotion and acknowledge the loss, but then to see how we can recultivate it in our lives. Sadness is not supposed to be some murky, muddy emotion that stays with us forever. What it's meant to do, what its job is to say, hey, this is important. This is so important, you need to get that back into your life. Now, I'm not naive here. I'm not saying that if you lose a loved one, a pet, a car, some experience, that you can automatically and unequivocally get it the same way somewhere else. You're not supposed to duplicate. This isn't about duplication. This is about recognizing that the values we have are able to be experienced in all different areas of our life. What we can learn from sadness is that we value way more than we give ourselves credit for. And I think I'll eventually do a video specifically on honoring what we've chosen and making decisions. Because what I've found is at the very end of a decision is really deciding yes to a particular value. When we don't allow ourselves to feel sad, we're not engaging with our core value system. And most ironically, what that can lead to is this next part of the video I need to talk about, which is guilt and shame. All right, I'll keep this brief because I think I'm going to want to do a longer video in the future. But why I want to talk about guilt and shame in the video on sadness is that I'm playing around with the notion of different emotions being combinations of our core emotions. From my experience and understanding, guilt is the combination of sadness first and then potentially anger or fear. So let's look at guilt real fast. Guilt is recognizing that we've done something wrong. Well, the something wrong is that we've done something outside of our value system. So what we've lost is connection to that value. I want y'all to go, with this, because I find this so amazing. We have disconnected from our value. The emotional response is guilt. The guilt is also that social component of, oh my God, I've done something outside of either the social norm or a cultural norm or some personal value, and that's going to keep me ostracized and disconnected from the group. So guilt here is hugely important. It helps us recognize that not only have we lost something, which is the sadness, but that anger and fear, the anger at ourselves for having done what we did, and the fear of, oh my God, I don't want to do this because I don't want to be ostracized. It's not a fun emotion. In fact, for me personally, I find guilt much more difficult than sadness because me, like a lot of people, we don't want to be wrong. But it's not about being wrong. It's the fear that we will in fact be rejected. So just as it is important to feel sadness when we feel guilt, we honor that value that we chose not to cultivate in our lives. And I keep saying value without qualifying this, and it's going to be about learning to recognize values are almost anything we can conceive of. Very oftentimes you can consider it an adjective: kindness, patience, strength, courage, determination. pick one of those generic words and it looks like a value, but it's not a value until you learn how to practically apply it in your life through your own personality. My form of kindness or patience or perseverance is going to look different than yours. All right, finally with shame. Shame is the kind of the distorted, poisoned corollary to guilt. Where guilt is some behavior that we've actually done that keeps us away from our value connection, shame doesn't point to an actual value or behavior at all. It just says that we suck as being human. So notice the corollary of sadness to pity, depression, and guilt to shame. Those are the two corollaries I want you to recognize, because what I'm differentiating is coming from a clean emotional place versus an egoic place. So with shame, we're actually not connecting to the behavior that we did. We're not looking for the missing value, and therefore we're not looking for a way to recultivate it in our lives. Instead, we're distracting ourselves by believing that we suck. It's debilitating, and it does not allow us to grow past and learn from our mistakes. Okay, so I kept this video quick and brief, but I just want to summarize real fast. Sadness is pointedly supposed to be that slower emotion in which you connect with what you've lost. One thing I didn't mention earlier in the video, and I've learned from personal experience that this is very interesting, is although sadness feels heavier and slower than a lot of the other emotions, when you learn to connect to it fully without judging, without criticizing yourself, the actual length of time you feel the emotion can be very brief. When I first started doing this and I would feel sadness for like 30 seconds intensely and then it'd be gone, I was like, what did I do wrong? It took me quite a while to recognize I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was doing everything right. What I was doing right was feeling the sensation, letting myself cry or whatever I was doing, and not judge the experience. And that's going to be the big kicker here, is to let yourself stay grounded in your body without judging the experience as wrong or bad. When we choose to not rush, but to accept fully what is, it actually can be a very quick process. Now, of course, sadness is not going to just be gone completely when you don't feel it. Depending on the degree and level of the loss, you might have to go through a long amount of time experiencing sadness. The goal with this and the process of this is every time it does come up, you slow down and you feel it. So let's say you're going through the personal effects of someone that you've just lost. You might have been crying for weeks on end and not cried for a few days. And you're going through these clothes, for example, and all of a sudden the sadness comes up. Anytime it comes up, honor it by feeling it. That's how we honor the person, the value, and our own sense of goodness in our life. Take care.